Hi, this is Rob McLaughlin. Welcome to Sound Advice. Today we're going to talk about pre and post processing, how it works, how do we set it up, and when would we use both pre and post. So let's look at the signal flow for pre and post fader. As a signal comes into each channel, from the gain through the EQ, through the compressor, through the gate, etc., it makes its way to the fader, and we're talking about the left and right faders. When we talk about pre and post, that's always in reference to the left and right main faders. So the signal travels to the fader, and then from the fader, once we adjust that signal flows on to the main output and away to left and right where we go. So if we take a copy of that signal before it gets to the fader or pre-fader, then that signal will not be affected by any changes that I make to the main left and right fader. If I take a copy of that signal post-fader, after the fader, then any changes that I make to that left-right fader will in fact change the signal, that post-fader signal. So pre-fader signal is a copy that's not affected by the main left and right fader. Post-fader signal is in fact affected by any change I make to the left-right main fader. So there's really two ways to make sure that a mix send is set to pre or post fade. If you're using it for a separate mix, then you want it to be pre-fade. So what you'll do is select the mix, in your case mix 2, okay, and then we're going to hold the pre-fade button. If you hold that pre-fade button, all of the channels should light up. That'll tell you that all of the channels are in pre-fade mode. If, for instance, some of the channels, and you can just turn them on or off, some of the channels are not lit up, that means they're in post-fade mode. And again, you just turn them on or off. Again, holding the pre-fade, all those channels should light up. The other way to do it is on the routing screen. So if I look at the routing screen and I select mix 2, again, instead of processing a channel, I go to routing. I'm looking at mix 2. In the middle of the screen, you've got pre-fade, all pre or all post. You select one or the other, and it gives you a confirmation. If I put them in all post, yes. Now when I hit my pre-fade, none of these buttons are lit, which tells me that all those channels are in post-fader mode. If I change it to all pre, confirm, yes. Again, I'm looking at mix 2. When I hit the pre-fader, now they're all lit up, telling me they're all in pre-fade mode. Again, if you want to have separate control, they should be in pre-fade mode. So when to use pre and post fader? Well, the most common scenario for pre-fader would be for monitors. So for instance, if I want my monitor to be on, say, mix 2, then I want to make sure that changes that I make to the front of house in left and right are not going to be changed in the monitor. For instance, imagine if I decided that as I'm mixing front of house, I want that piano to be much louder. And I can bring up the channel for the piano in front of house in left and right. But I don't suddenly want that channel to get much louder in the monitor. The musician's already very happy with the level of the piano, and I don't want to suddenly have it get much louder. So a monitor mix is typically a pre-fader signal. In other words, we want a copy of that signal pre or before it gets to the left and right faders. The obvious or most common use for post-fader is for things like an effects. For an effects channel, I definitely want those to be post-fader, or typically want that to be post-fader. In other words, when I turn down, if my effects happens to be reverb, when I turn down a singer's, let's say for instance, this is my singer's microphone in left and right. If I turn down that singer's microphone, I want the effects to automatically go down as well. I don't want to turn down the singer's microphone and be left with effects, or for instance, a reverb that sort of runs on without any signal from that microphone. All right, so I want, in that case, I want the effects to follow the changes that I make to the main left and right, I do want that reverb to come down as I bring down that microphone. So in that case, for an effects, I would want that to be post fader or post fade. So a bit of a hybrid configuration that's fairly common, particularly in this day when a lot of people are doing streaming, is to use an aux mix to feed their streaming. However, if you happen to be the only person in the sound booth and you don't want that aux to be set to pre-fade, so that if you turn down for instance, you turn down the piano in left and right, you don't want to also have to remember to go to your mix, your aux mix, and also turn down the piano. So you'd like to have that mix that you're sending to your online streaming, you'd like to have that follow your left and right mixes. So one of the things you can do, very handy, you take that mix, and we're going to use mix 3, and set all the faders to unity. So just push all the faders to unity, including the master fader. Okay. Now I've got a stereo pair there, so they're jumping on me. Set all the faders to unity, including the master fader. This is for mix 3, so this is the mix that I'm using for sending out to my streaming. And then I'll set mix 3 to all be post fader. And again, I can select mix 3 and just set it all to post. So every channel is post fader, which means they're now going to follow the changes that I make in left and right. And now I know that if I decide to, for instance, bring down the piano or bring up the piano, either way, on my left and right, that same change is going to be reflected in mix 3 that's being sent to my streaming service because it's post fade.